A tech millionaire hired a poor woman to act as his girlfriend, but what she said at dinner changed everything. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. The rain drummed softly against the cafe windows, streaking the glass in silver lines. Inside, the smell of espresso and old wood mingled in the air. The lunch crowd had gone, leaving behind the quiet hum of a few conversations and the faint hiss of steaming milk. Behind the counter, Maya Nguyen, 26, wiped down a table for the 5th time, trying to ignore the eviction notice folded in her apron pocket. Her shoes were wet, her rent was due. Her mother's medical bills had doubled again. Every sound in that cafe, the register beep, the hiss of the coffee machine felt like a clock ticking toward something she could not stop. Excuse me. The voice was deep, steady, and startlingly calm. Maya looked up. A man in a charcoal suit stood at the counter. The kind of man who looked too perfect for this place, polished shoes, tailored fit, and a phone that probably cost more than her monthly paycheck. He had the kind of presence that made the air change. "Yes, sir," she said, forcing a polite smile. "What can I get you?" He did not look at the menu. He looked at her. "You are Maya Nguyen?" Her heart stuttered. Yes? Did I forget your order earlier?" The man shook his head slightly, then reached into his briefcase. The movement was precise, almost mechanical. He pulled out a thin folder and placed it on the counter. His voice dropped lower, smooth as glass. "I am Ethan Cole." The name hit her before the meaning did. Ethan Cole, the reclusive tech millionaire who had built Cole Innovations, the software empire that had turned him into a billionaire before 35. She had seen his photo on magazine covers, smiling that same unreadable smile. And now he was standing in front of her, holding out a contract. Maya blinked, completely thrown. I think you have the wrong person." "I do not." He opened the folder, sliding a printed page toward her. The words at the top made her mouth go dry. Temporary relationship agreement. "I need someone to act as my girlfriend for 2 weeks," Ethan said, his tone businesslike. "There will be public events, 5 in total. I will provide transportation, wardrobe, and a payment of $5,000. In return, you will appear as my partner. Nothing more." Maya stared at him, then at the paper. "This is some kind of joke, right?" "I do not make jokes, Miss Nguyen," he replied calmly. "You can read it if you like. Everything is clearly stated. No intimacy, no obligations beyond appearances." She laughed under her breath, half nervous, half incredulous. "You are serious." "Completely." He checked his watch as if timing her reaction. "I have a family event this weekend and investors arriving next week. I need to avoid certain personal complications. You fit the criteria. Ordinary, grounded, believable." Her cheeks flushed. "Ordinary? That is why you chose me?" Ethan met her eyes without flinching. "That is exactly why." For a long second, the sound of the rain filled the silence between them. Maya wanted to tell him to leave, that she was not some pawn for his image management. But the eviction notice in her apron seemed to burn through the fabric, reminding her of the reality she could not escape. She swallowed hard. "Why me? Out of all the people in this city, why would you think I would say yes?" Ethan closed the folder and slipped it back into his case. "Because, Miss Nguyen, you look like someone who keeps her word, and I need that more than anything." He placed a business card on the counter, silver letters embossed on matte black. "Ethan Cole. Cole Innovations. Think about it," he said simply. "If you decide yes, come to this address by 7 tonight. "Oh." Then he turned and walked out into the rain, leaving her staring after him, the card trembling between her fingers. Maya let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. The door chimed softly as it closed behind him. She looked down at the counter at the damp ring his coffee cup had left and whispered to herself, half in disbelief, half in fear, "What kind of man hires a stranger to pretend to love him?" Outside, the city blurred behind the rain. Inside, the contract offer sat heavy in her mind, daring her to cross a line she had never imagined touching. The rain had stopped by evening, but the clouds still hung low over Brooklyn, turning the city into a dim watercolor of lights and steam. Maya stood in her small apartment, staring at the business card on her kitchen table as if it were some strange artifact. Ethan Cole, Cole Innovations. The black letters gleamed under the flickering bulb. Her apartment smelled faintly of instant noodles and damp plaster. A single leak dripped near the window, landing in a metal bowl with a hollow tap every few seconds. The sound had become her metronome, counting down the hours of her life she could not seem to get ahead of. The eviction notice was still taped to the refrigerator door. Her landlord had given her 3 days. 3 days before everything she owned, 2 suitcases, her mother's framed photo, and a stack of unpaid bills would end up on the street. She sank into the old couch, rubbing her hands over her face. What kind of man offers a contract like that? She muttered. And what kind of fool even considers it? Her phone buzzed, a reminder for her mother's hospital payment. Overdue. Again. She opened her banking app, staring at the small, cruel number that blinked back at her. $56.18. That was all she had. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, gentle but tired. Do not give up, Maya. You always find a way. Maya swallowed hard. A way. Maybe that was what this was, just a way to survive. Not forever. Just enough to breathe. She stood and grabbed her coat. The clock on the wall read 6:32 p.m. If she was going to show up, she had 28 minutes to decide whether she would cross the invisible line between pride and desperation. By 6:59, she was outside a tall glass building on Madison Avenue. Cole Innovations towered over the street, its name glowing white against the night. Inside, the lobby gleamed with marble and chrome. She hesitated at the revolving door, seeing her reflection, wet hair, thrift store jacket, shoes scuffed from years of standing behind a counter. A security guard eyed her politely. Can I help you, ma'am? Maya took a slow breath. I am here to see Mr. Ethan Cole. He lifted an eyebrow but checked the list on his tablet. He is expecting you. Elevator on the right, top floor. Her pulse skipped. He was expecting her. That realization sent a shiver down her spine. The elevator doors closed, sealing her in with her reflection. The soft hum rose as the numbers climbed. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world made of glass and silence. Ethan was standing by the window, city lights spreading behind him like a constellation. He turned when he heard her footsteps. You came, he said simply. I should not have, Maya replied, voice small. But I did. He gestured toward a seat by the desk. On it lay the same contract she had seen that morning. Neat, precise, unreal. I will not waste your time, he said. The terms are the same. 2 weeks, 5 events, public appearances only, payment upon completion. $5,000, she murmured. The number sounded enormous and impossible at the same time. You will also have access to a stylist, transportation, and a private apartment during the duration, he added. Maya let out a dry laugh. A private apartment? You really plan everything? I have to. Ethan's tone softened almost imperceptibly. In my world, image means control. I cannot afford chaos. And I am? What? A prop? He met her eyes, unflinching. You are the only person in that cafe who looked real. The words caught her off guard. For a second, she forgot to breathe. He continued, quieter now. People around me want contracts, power, recognition. You looked like someone who has nothing to prove. She stared at him, torn between anger and understanding. Maybe that is because I actually have nothing. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Then we understand each other. He pushed the contract toward her, along with a pen. The paper felt heavier than it should have. She scanned the first line again. This agreement establishes a temporary arrangement of companionship between the undersigned parties. Her name was typed neatly at the bottom. Maya Nguyen. Do I sign in blue ink or black? She asked quietly, almost to herself. Black, he replied. It photographs better. That answer made her laugh softly. Of course it does. Her hand trembled as she signed. The moment the pen left the page, something inside her shifted a mix of fear, guilt, and the strange calm that comes after a storm you have already surrendered to. Ethan reached into a drawer and pulled out a small silver key. Your new address is on the tag. A driver will pick you up at 8 tomorrow morning. Our first event is Friday evening. Maya took the key, its metal cold against her palm. This is really happening, she whispered. It is just business, Ethan said. She nodded, but deep down, She knew that nothing about this felt like business. It felt like stepping off a cliff with her eyes open. As she left his office, the city spread below like a field of stars. She clutched the key in her hand and thought of her mother's voice again. You always find a way. Maybe this was her way. Or maybe it was the beginning of something that would cost her far more than money. The next morning arrived gray and silent, the city still wrapped in a thin fog. Maya stood in front of a full-length mirror in a small, minimalist apartment that looked more like a showroom than a home. Everything inside was sleek white walls, polished floors, a bed that had probably never known wrinkles. Her reflection did not fit there. She smoothed her borrowed blouse and tried to convince herself that the woman in the mirror looked ready. At exactly 8 o'clock, there was a soft knock at the door. When she opened it, a man in a black suit stood outside, holding an umbrella and a tablet. "Good morning, Miss Nguyen," he said with professional precision. "I am Adam, Mr. Cole's driver. The stylist is waiting downstairs." Maya nodded, gripping her small purse as she followed him into the elevator. The moment the doors opened to the lobby, a wave of perfume, camera flashes, and luxury swept over her senses. A woman in a tailored suit approached, tall, poised, confident. "You must be Maya," she said warmly. "I am Claire, your stylist. We have a lot to cover." Within minutes, Maya was seated in front of a wall of mirrors, surrounded by racks of designer dresses. Claire moved like a storm of calm efficiency, measuring, adjusting, instructing. "Head up, shoulders back. If you feel nervous, smile. A confident woman changes the energy of the entire room," she said. "I have never worn anything like this," Maya admitted, her voice small. "Then you are about to surprise a lot of people," Claire replied with a knowing smile. By afternoon, Maya barely recognized herself. Her hair was swept into a soft wave, her makeup understated but flawless. When she stepped into the dark car waiting outside, she caught her reflection in the tinted window and almost laughed. It was strange how appearance could erase entire years of struggle, at least on the surface. The car glided through Manhattan traffic until the skyline opened into the glass tower of Cole Innovations. Ethan was waiting in the lobby, standing near a sculpture of brushed steel. He was dressed in a navy suit, every detail exact. When he turned and saw her, there was a flicker, something brief, unreadable in his eyes. "You are on time," he said. "I figured being late would violate some hidden clause," she replied, half teasing. The corner of his mouth twitched, almost a smile. "You look different." "I look expensive," she corrected softly. He did not disagree. Instead, he handed her a small envelope. Inside was a printed schedule, 5 events over 2 weeks. Business dinner, charity gala, shareholders reception, private luncheon, and a family gathering. Each had notes attached, like a script. "You will need to remember a few details," Ethan explained. "How we met, where we had our first date, small personal facts. Authenticity is in the small things." Maya scanned the paper, half amused. "So we are actors now." "Exactly," he said. "And this is a stage that tolerates no mistakes." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Maya noticed how the staff greeted Ethan, every nod precise, every word cautious. He walked through his world like a man who trusted no one. When they entered his office, she caught sight of a large photo on the wall, Ethan shaking hands with political leaders, his smile perfectly controlled. She took a slow breath. "You live in a different universe." He looked at her, something flickering in his expression. "A very small one," he replied quietly. That night, their first public appearance was a dinner with potential investors at a private restaurant in Soho. The place shimmered with soft light, crystal glasses catching every reflection. Maya's heels clicked against the marble floor as they entered. Heads turned, cameras flashed. Ethan placed a steady hand at her back, guiding her through the crowd. "Maya, this is Mr. Bennett and his wife, Joanna," Ethan introduced. The couple smiled politely. Joanna's eyes, sharp and curious, scanned Maya's simple necklace and modest clutch. "So, Ethan, this is the mysterious girlfriend we have heard about?" Ethan nodded calmly. "Yes, Maya has been a quiet presence in my life." Maya caught the hesitation but smiled anyway. "He means I do not talk as much as he does." The table laughed, the ice broke, and Ethan glanced at her, mildly surprised. Her quick wit softened the tension he had not realized he was carrying. Dinner unfolded like a carefully written play. Maya answered questions with ease, deflecting curiosity with humor. When someone asked how they had met, she said, He spilled coffee on my sketchbook, so technically, this is his fault. The guests laughed again, and Ethan leaned back, watching her with quiet curiosity. For a woman who had never lived in this world, she was handling it better than most who had trained for it. After dessert, when the conversation turned to technology and market growth, Maya stayed silent, letting the men debate numbers and profit margins. But then one of them, half joking, asked her opinion. She looked around the table and said, "I think the world needs fewer people building apps and more people building trust. You can code a product, but you cannot code integrity." The room went still. Even Ethan froze for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, one of the investors nodded. "That is surprisingly insightful." Ethan's gaze lingered on her, something unspoken passing between them. When they left the restaurant, the city air felt cooler. Maya exhaled, realizing how long she had been holding her breath. Ethan opened the car door for her without a word. Inside the car, the silence stretched until she finally said, "You did not warn me it would feel like an interview with the entire planet." He looked out the window, a hint of a smile forming. "You handled it better than most professionals." She turned toward him. "Do you say that to all your fake girlfriends?" His eyes met hers. "You are the first." The car moved through the night. The city lights reflected in the glass like 1,000 quiet questions neither of them was ready to answer. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of preparation. Between fittings, etiquette lessons, and rehearsals for each upcoming event, Maya felt like she was being rewritten one lesson at a time. Claire drilled her on posture, tone, and the art of smiling without showing too much emotion. Every step, every glance had to be precise, calculated, believable. By the end of the week, Maya had learned to hold a champagne glass by the stem, to remember which fork came first, and to nod gracefully when people mentioned companies she had never heard of. But every night, when she came back to her apartment, she would wipe off the makeup and stare into the mirror at the woman beneath it all, wondering how long she could keep pretending. Friday came fast, the first charity gala of their contract. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, chandeliers spilling reflections over polished marble. Maya stood beside Ethan at the entrance, her dress the color of midnight, her nerves hidden behind a steady smile. As cameras flashed, Ethan leaned slightly toward her and murmured, "Remember, we enter together. Smile, then let me lead the introductions." "I know," she whispered back. "I studied the script." He gave a faint nod. "You always do." Inside, the air buzzed with chatter and music. Guests turned as they walked in, murmuring approval. Ethan greeted executives and philanthropists with ease, but Maya noticed something beneath his calm facade, an exhaustion, a distance, as if he was always performing for an invisible audience. During dinner, she sat quietly at his side until a guest asked, "Maya, what drew you to Ethan? Surely not his charm." The table laughed. Maya smiled. "No, it was the silence," she said softly. "He is the only man I have met who listens before he speaks." The laughter faded into thoughtful silence. Ethan glanced at her, eyes unreadable. For the first time, she saw a flicker of something real gratitude, maybe, or the shock of being seen. Later, as the night ended, they stepped out onto the terrace overlooking the city. The music inside was distant now, replaced by the hum of traffic far below. Maya leaned on the railing, her bare shoulders catching the chill. "You did well tonight," Ethan said quietly. She smiled without looking at him. "You mean I survived without embarrassing you?" He hesitated, then said, "I mean, you made people forget this was pretend." She turned toward him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "And did you forget too?" For a heartbeat, he did not answer. Then he said, "No, but for a moment I wanted to." Neither spoke after that. They stood in silence, side by side, strangers bound by a contract that was starting to feel dangerously real. In the reflection of the glass doors behind them, they almost looked like a couple except for the distance that neither of them could cross. The next evening came with another test, sharper than the last. Ethan had invited Maya to a shareholders' dinner at one of the city's oldest country clubs, the kind of place where every handshake carried a century of power. The moment she stepped through the grand oak doors, she could feel eyes turn. Every whisper seemed to measure her, her dress, her posture, her place at Ethan Cole's side. Ethan walked with the calm of someone who had lived his whole life under scrutiny. His hand rested lightly at her back as he guided her toward the long table set with silver and crystal. "You will be fine," he said quietly without looking at her. I am not sure fine is part of the job description, she whispered back. He almost smiled. It is now. The evening began smoothly. Waiters glided between tables, serving roasted salmon and fine wine. Ethan spoke about his company's new project, his tone measured and precise. Maya listened, nodding when others did, careful not to interrupt. But then a woman across the table leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. So, Maya, she said with a polite edge, Ethan tells us you are an artist? That is interesting. Not exactly his usual circle. Oh. Maya felt her throat tighten, but she managed to smile. Yes, art is messy and unpredictable. I suppose that balances him out. The table chuckled, but the woman was not done. And how long have you two been together? A few months? Ethan answered smoothly before Maya could. 5, officially. The woman tilted her head. I see. And how did you meet? For a second, Maya froze. The script flashed in her mind, met at a tech fundraiser, coffee spill, shared laugh. But her voice came out before she could stop it. He came into the cafe where I work, she said softly. I thought he was lost. Maybe he was. The table went silent, surprised. Then, unexpectedly, one of the older board members smiled. That is refreshing. Real stories are rare around here. Ethan said nothing. His expression was unreadable, but his hand brushed hers under the table, a brief, almost imperceptible touch. Later, when the dinner ended and they stepped outside into the crisp night, Maya exhaled shakily. I forgot the line, she said. I ruined your script. You did not, Ethan replied. You saved it. She looked at him, confused. People believed you, he said quietly. For the first time, they believed us. For a long moment, they stood there beneath the streetlights, the city humming around them. Maya realized that pretending had never felt so real. And as Ethan held the car door open for her, she caught his reflection in the window, calm, controlled, but softer than before. Inside the car, she whispered almost to herself, maybe this was never about the money. Ethan glanced at her. No, he said, it never was. The driver started the engine, and the world outside blurred again. But this time the silence between them felt less like distance and more like something waiting to begin. The following week brought a rare pause in their schedule. There were no cameras, no investors, no questions to answer. Ethan had meetings until late afternoon, and Maya was free to spend the day alone in the penthouse he had arranged for her. She wandered through the wide, quiet space, tracing her fingers along the edge of the piano she had never seen him play. The city stretched below, sunlight bouncing off glass towers. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe. Yet that freedom felt strangely heavy. She found a small balcony at the far end of the living room and stepped outside, letting the wind pull at her hair. From this height, New York looked unreal, like a painting that never stopped moving. She thought of her mother's hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, the sound of machines that never slept. Somewhere down there, real life was still happening, people surviving without contracts or facades. When Ethan returned that evening, the city was glowing in shades of gold and blue. He loosened his tie and set his phone down without speaking. Maya was sitting on the couch with a cup of cocoa, her legs curled under a blanket. You are home early, she said gently. Not really, he replied, sinking into the chair across from her. I just started leaving meetings before they could drain me. That sounds like progress, she said, smiling. He looked at her, studying the calm in her face. How do you do it? How do you sit there and not let everything get to you? Maya shrugged. You learn when you do not have a choice. Life is not always about control. Sometimes you survive by letting go. Her words hung in the air, quiet but sharp. Ethan leaned back, his expression unreadable. Letting go is not something I do well. I noticed, she said softly, teasing but kind. He smiled faintly. You are the only person who talks to me like that. Maybe you need more people who do, she said. For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of the city filtered in through the balcony doors. Then Maya stood and handed him the extra mug of cocoa she had made. Here, you look like someone who forgets to take a break. He accepted it, his fingers brushing hers. The warmth startled him. Thank you, he said quietly. They sat together, sipping in silence. The distance between them, once drawn in ink and signatures, felt smaller now, blurred by something they could not name. After a while, Ethan said, You know this arrangement will end soon. I know, she answered, eyes fixed on the skyline. But for now, It is real enough. He looked at her then, really looked at her, the woman who had stepped into his world and somehow made it feel human again. And for the first time, Ethan Cole, the man who built an empire from logic and algorithms, could not calculate what he was feeling. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the sound of traffic and life below. Inside, two people sat side by side, pretending nothing had changed, even though everything had. By the end of the second week, the arrangement that had started as business began to feel fragile, too soft, too human. Maya could see it in the way Ethan lingered near her when he did not have to, in the way his voice dropped when he spoke her name. Yet just as she started to believe something real could bloom beneath the contract, the world outside decided otherwise. It began with a headline: Ethan Cole's mystery girlfriend, from coffee shop to penthouse. The article spread like fire across every major outlet. Photos of Maya leaving the building, her name, even her mother's medical debt, all published without mercy. By the time she saw it, her phone was already buzzing with messages from coworkers and strangers she had never met. When Ethan arrived at the penthouse that evening, Maya was sitting on the couch, the newspaper spread open beside her. Her eyes were red, not from tears, but from the quiet, exhausted kind of anger that came when pride and pain collided. "Is this your doing?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. Ethan froze. "What do you mean?" "You told me everything was controlled," she said, holding up the paper. "Does this look controlled to you?" He stepped forward, reading the headline, the words cutting through him like ice. "I did not approve this. Someone leaked it." "Someone from your world," she said bitterly. "Someone who thought it would be entertaining to humiliate the woman pretending to love you." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I will find out who did it." Maya shook her head. "Do not bother. The damage is done." She stood, crossing her arms. "This was supposed to be fake, remember? Just a contract. But the moment my real life got dragged into your perfect world, it stopped being pretend." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Maya, I can fix this." Her eyes glistened. "You cannot fix people's perception, Ethan. You cannot sign a deal to make them respect me." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The city's glow flickered across their faces. Then she said softly, "You said you needed someone real, but when the world saw me for who I am, you let them tear me apart." He tried to reach for her hand, but she pulled away. "I am done being your image." Ethan's throat tightened. "Do not walk away like this." She looked at him, at the man who had unknowingly given her both hope and heartbreak, and whispered, "You do not get to tell me how to leave." Then she picked up her coat, the key he had given her still cold in her hand, and walked toward the door. When it closed behind her, Ethan stood alone in the silent apartment, the sound of the lock clicking echoing louder than any storm outside. The contract that had once felt safe now lay on his desk, torn at the edges, a reminder that some promises cannot be managed by paper or rules, only by courage he had not yet found. Days passed, and the city kept moving as if nothing had happened. But for Ethan, everything had stopped. Meetings blurred into noise, phone calls went unanswered, and the silence in his penthouse felt like punishment. The press continued to circle like vultures, feeding on rumors about the woman who had fooled him. Every headline made his chest tighten. It was supposed to be an arrangement without feelings, yet the absence of her had left him hollow. His assistant entered one morning holding a tablet. "Sir, the board is asking for a public statement. They want you to clarify the nature of your relationship with Miss Nguyen." Ethan stared at the skyline, the reflection of his own face in the glass. "They want me to protect the company," he said quietly. "But I am the reason she was destroyed." The assistant hesitated. "Then what should I tell them?" "Tell them I am handling it," he said, though he did not yet know how. That night, Ethan sat in the dark of his office, scrolling through the same article for the 100th time. In one of the photos, Maya was walking down a street, head held high despite the swarm of cameras. There was no fear on her face, only quiet dignity. He remembered her words. "You cannot sign a deal to make them respect me." It was then he realized what needed to be done. The next day, Cole Innovations held a press conference for their newest project launch. The hall was filled with reporters, shareholders, and cameras broadcasting live. Ethan walked onto the stage in a black suit, but his expression was not the polished, calm people expected. He looked human, tired, certain, and ready. When the questions began, he raised a hand to stop them. "Before we discuss the company," he said, his voice steady, "I have something personal to say." The room fell silent. Every lens turned toward him. 2 weeks ago, A woman named Maya Nguyen was introduced to the world through gossip and lies. The truth is simple. I asked her to help me with a business arrangement. She agreed, not for fame, not for money, but because she needed a way to help her family. What she did not deserve was the humiliation that followed. The crowd shifted uneasily. Ethan continued. She is not a prop. She is not a scandal. She is the most genuine person I have ever met, and I failed to protect her. That is on me. He took a breath. I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for decency. If any of you are looking for a story, write this one. Write that integrity still matters. When he stepped down, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted. Cameras flashed, but for once he did not care about the angles or headlines. Outside, the evening air felt lighter. Ethan looked up at the skyline, the city alive and indifferent, and whispered as if to her, "It is time you were seen for who you really are." The next morning, every headline had changed. Ethan Cole defends former partner. She taught me integrity. And somewhere across town, Maya read it, her fingers trembling around the paper, her heart breaking open in a way that was both painful and healing all at once. A week later, spring sunlight returned to the city, washing away the gray. The storm that had torn their lives apart had finally quieted. Maya was back at the small cafe where everything had begun, tying her apron behind her waist, trying to feel normal again. Customers came and went, and life moved on, but her heart was restless. She had read Ethan's statement over and over, hearing his voice in every word. It had not been a corporate apology. It had been something real. Around noon, the doorbell chimed, and the familiar sound made her look up. Ethan stood there, no suit, no cameras, no entourage, just him. His hair was slightly messy, his sleeves rolled up, his eyes tired but gentle. For a moment, the whole cafe fell silent. She froze, unsure if she should speak first, but he broke the silence. "You still make the best coffee in this city," he said softly. Her throat tightened. "I did not expect to see you here." "I had to," he said, stepping closer. "There are things I left unsaid." Maya crossed her arms, half to protect herself, half to stop them from shaking. "You already said them on live television." He smiled faintly. "That was for the world. This is for you." Ugh. He reached into his coat and placed something on the counter. It was a small white envelope, but not like the contract he had once offered. Inside was a single handwritten letter. There are no terms, no rules, no signatures. Just one question. Will you let this be real? Maya looked at the letter, then at him. The last time he had stood in that spot, he had offered her money. This time, he offered honesty. "Why me?" she whispered. "You could have anyone." Because you never wanted anything from me," he said simply. "You told the truth even when it hurt. You reminded me that love is not a deal to be signed." Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. "You are still terrible at timing, Ethan." "I know," he said, "but I am finally learning." For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached under the counter and pulled out a cup of cocoa, sliding it toward him. "You forgot this last time?" she said. "Finish it before you start another contract." He laughed quietly, the sound warm and full, and took a sip. The tension that had once lived between them melted into something steady and kind. Outside, sunlight poured through the windows, turning the steam above the coffee machine into a soft, golden mist. Ethan reached across the counter and took her hand, the gesture simple but full of meaning. "No more pretending," he said. "No more," she agreed. The bell above the door chimed again as a new customer entered. But the world seemed to pause just for them. Two people who had signed a contract to fake love had finally found the courage to live it for real. And in that quiet cafe where everything had started, Maya realized that sometimes the most unbelievable stories begin not with a perfect plan but with a single, imperfect act of faith.